world that I'm in right now is the one where I am tying up a ton of loose ends. And that pertains to two cards in particular, the Wheel of Fortune and the Chariot. The Wheel of Fortune and the Chariot were two cards that I had actually started months and months ago. And I'm finally coming back and trying to finish them up. Part of these cards were done while streaming on Twitch. Part of them were done in between other projects. Part of it was done as just like busy work. These two cards have just come together very, very slowly. And I think it's because I had sort of one foot in and one foot out on the project. And the thing that I'm struggling with now is that I'm trying to just get these two done because they just feel like they're lingering in creative purgatory, and it's kind of driving me crazy. The other part of why it's taking me so long to work on these ones is that there's so much symbolism and meaning packed into these two particular cards. I have a lot of moments where I look at this project and say, I should have done this, or what if I had done this, especially when I think about working in a particular order. When I started the project, I was pulling cards just organically out of my own personal tarot decks and using that as my starting place. Whatever card I pulled was the card that I would then work on. My thought then was that the energy and vibe and meaning behind it would sink in even deeper because it's a card that I actually pulled for that particular day or week or month or whatever. Now that I'm farther in and now that I'm trying to get the major arcana done, I wish I had worked in order. I wish I had just followed the Fool's Journey, started at the beginning and worked my way through, and I am having a little bit of regret with that, and I'm trying to just let that go and keep moving forward. I can't let these what ifs or maybe I should have doubts creep in and really like weigh me down. They feel like anchors at times, and it's really what I call creative purgatory. I think a lot of people would say maybe the hardest part about a creative project is starting, which is definitely true. But there's also that in-between place where you're far into a project, where there's kind of no turning back, but it's also still early. It's really hard. I mean, something else that I'm also trying to wrap my head around, and I think that's also why I took a pause on these two cards, was that they were lacking their numbers and the title. They were basically missing the identifiers. When I look at the cards on a whole, I really love the way that they look. They feel like they're mine, and that's really important to me, that every single one of these cards feels like something that came from me, and it's uniquely my own and it's my style. There are moments though where maybe I'm just working on my own tarot studies, I'm pulling cards or doing layouts or spreads from other decks, and I see the way that those cards are formatted, and it's really hard. It pulls at me quite a bit. When I look at my cards, I often worry that there's not an element of uniformity, and that's something that you'll see in a lot of tarot decks, is that they all have the same sort of number, or the image is set within sort of a frame that then has the text in the same place, very legible, digitally done. And I haven't done that with my cards. I have hand written them on old pieces of ledger paper or notebook paper or scraps of painted whatever, and I've even put them in different places. They're by no means uniform. And when I look at the cards on a whole, it looks really cool, but there are moments when I'm in a card individually working on it that I fear that I should have formatted them a little bit differently. At this point though, I'm too deep in that that's not something I'm going to change, so I have to just accept it. And it's, again, a love-hate, tug and pull purgatory that just it eats at me a little bit, and I don't want that to deter me from continuing to work on this project, because it's just important that I keep my momentum going. And here's a perfect situation where I have two cards near completion sitting on a platter just waiting to be done, and the thing that's holding me back is this purgatory state, and I just need to let it go. Once I decided that I was just going to focus on the major arcana, and I began sort of working out of order and just choosing cards that I felt inspired to work on, the Chariot was one that was always towards the bottom of my list. And part of that was that I wasn't sure how I was going to represent it. I don't draw vehicles or obviously I don't think I've ever even drawn a traditional chariot before, but it's not something that is in my wheelhouse of drawing and my imagery that I like to default to. And I wanted to do something different. So when I had this hermit crab that was actually from a different creative project and something that I never ended up using, I decided to apply him to this card because I thought it was kind of cool. And then right away when I put him on the template that I sort of use, I was picturing these eels, sort of like Flotsam and Jetsam, holding the banner of the Chariot text and sort of pulling this hermit crab along. The visual for me came pretty quick, but then there's that flip side of, am I getting all the proper symbolism into this particular card? Because there's a lot. It's one of those cards that has a lot of buried symbolism in it. And that's important to me because I do try to look back, especially at the Rider-Waite deck, to see how has this card been traditionally shown? How is this traditionally represented? And I want to pull those elements, and although I'm sort of cherry picking what I want to use, I do want to have some of those elements in my deck, in my cards. So although the card and the illustration is inherently mine, there are elements and symbolism that I've managed to apply into it. So for example, if you look on the shell of the hermit crab, he's got black and white moons all over him. That is a reference to the black and white sphinx that is often seen on the cards. I thought that even the idea of armor is sort of implied a bit, that it's the shell of your crab there. So it's got that armor kind of warrior element to it a little bit as well. I call to the canopy of stars as well. You can see that I decided to use like sand dollars around the upper kind of border. And I thought that that was also an interesting sort of nod to that canopy of stars traditionally seen in the Chariot. The Wheel of Fortune was another tricky card because, again, there's a lot of symbolism in it. You have often these 4 different creatures of specific zodiac in the corners. You have the wheel in the center. There's a lot of different directions that you could take this in. In my initial sketches when I was drawing the Wheel of Fortune, I kept kind of defaulting back to a spider web sort of idea with branches, that the outside was made of branches and then the interior was this webbing. But I felt that that was a little bit too on the nose, but I still liked that sort of nature element to it as well. The nature element was a key thing for me too because it just feels like that life cycle, and I wanted to kind of bring that into this card, that what goes around comes around, cycles of life, sort of seasons. When I saw that I had kind of been doing these branches with the webbing, I liked the branches on their own and then decided to put sort of bones into it as well. Not only is it something that I like to illustrate, but I liked that contrast of the branches and the bones together, again sort of hinting to life cycles and nature all together in one place. This of course was incredibly time consuming to do, and it was something that I had definitely started on a Twitch stream a very long time ago and then continued to work on as sort of like a busy project where I had a lot of them inked out, and then I was slowly hand cutting each little branch and bone out on its own. I then of course assembled them all together onto the wheel, and then the card lived in that purgatory state until I had returned to it now and decided to put on the title and the number as well as the bats on the corners. One of the big things with the Wheel of Fortune is that there are 4 zodiac signs represented inside of it. We have Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, and Aquarius. So rather than me trying to depict these as individual images, and I didn't want to take away from my center sort of bone and branch thing that I had been working so hard to put together, so I decided to just do little bats, and on the body of each bat is a symbol of each said zodiac. I thought that this was a cool way to include that symbolism, but also still do it in my way because I love drawing bats and they felt like nice little corner pieces that almost kind of gave some stability to the card a little bit with how busy the wheel is in the center. With the Chariot and the Wheel of Fortune completed now, and I think they're completed. I always kind of go through that bit of a process where I hold it up in front of me and stare at it, and I might come back and do some tweaking. That's always going to be the case for any card that I deem completed. There's always room for tweaks. I'm in an interesting place now. With these two completed, I am now in a place where I have to start a card from scratch. I currently don't have any of my remaining major arcana cards in any sort of progress state. So I either need to start from scratch on my last 3 remaining major arcana cards, or I'm going to tackle the 2 cards that I intend on revamping. The Death card and the Lovers are 2 older cards that I had completed, and since my style and things that I've been doing with the other cards has evolved so much, I'm thinking about revisiting those. So that's kind of where I'm at in the project. I'm either going to start one of those 3 new ones, or I'm going to revisit those 2 older cards and see if I can rework them. I don't know if I'm ready to rework anything right now, but maybe it's time to start something new. I don't know. We'll see.